Corporate fraud investigation. Your name implicated. Prepare for federal charges. The clock struck midnight in the Thornton Industries Tower. 73 floors below, the city pulsed with life. But up here, in the glass-walled penthouse office, Marcus Thornton sat alone, a billionaire surrounded by everything money could buy, yet more isolated than he'd ever been. His hands trembled as he read the email one more time. Corporate fraud investigation. Your name implicated. Prepare for federal charges. 20 years of building an empire, gone in a single act. He didn't hear the elevator ding. Didn't notice the quiet woman who stepped onto his floor, pushing a cleaning cart with a broken wheel that squeaked softly against the marble. Her name was Diane Washington, though he'd never bothered to learn it. In 8 hours, everything he knew about power, worth, and truth would be destroyed. But not in the way he feared. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Marcus Thornton stared at the email that could end him. Mr. Thornton, federal investigators have received evidence of securities fraud involving Thornton Industries. Your CFO has provided documentation suggesting your direct involvement. We expect formal charges within 48 hours. He read it again, then again. The words refused to change. Impossible. He'd built this company from nothing, a college dropout with a borrowed laptop and a revolutionary idea. 15 years of 18-hour days, calculated risks, and ruthless determination had created a tech empire worth $3 billion. He'd done everything by the book. Mostly. His reflection stared back from the floor-to-ceiling windows. A man who looked successful but felt hollow. The city glittered 73 floors below, indifferent to his crisis. When had he last felt truly connected to another human being? When had success become his only measure of worth? The prescription bottles on his desk caught his eye. Anxiety medication. Sleep aids. The untouched dinner his assistant had ordered 6 hours ago, now cold. The framed photo of his ex-wife and daughter, face down since the divorce. This office was supposed to represent achievement. Instead, it felt like a glass prison. Marcus loosened his tie and returned to his laptop, frantically searching through files for anything that could prove his innocence. His CFO, Richard Shun, his trusted partner for a decade, was claiming Marcus had approved fraudulent accounting practices. It was a lie. It had to be. But who would believe him over documented evidence? 73 floors below, Diane Washington swiped her ID card and entered the service entrance of Thornton Industries. Her second job of 3. Evening, Diane, the security guard nodded. Evening, Frank. She smiled despite the exhaustion settling into her bones. 4 hours of sleep last night. Maybe 5 tonight if she finished this shift quickly and skipped the third job. But she couldn't skip it. Not with her mother's medical bills coming due and her son Jamal's college applications sitting on their kitchen table. Jamal had been accepted to MIT. Full ride if they could just cover the remaining expenses. Her brilliant boy, who'd never let their circumstances dim his dreams. Diane pushed her cart toward the service elevator. The left wheel squeaked, had for weeks. She'd reported it, but maintenance kept forgetting to fix it. Some things just stayed broken when you weren't important enough to matter. The elevator climbed. She watched the floor numbers tick upward, each one representing a world further from her own reality. By the time she reached the executive floors, she'd be in a different universe, one of leather chairs, imported coffee machines, and people who earned more in a day than she made in a year. Floor 73. The penthouse level. The elevator doors opened, and Diane stepped into Marcus Thornton's world. Neither of them knew that by morning, both their lives would be completely transformed. The office lights were still blazing. He was still there, and what Diane was about to discover would change everything. The squeaking wheel announced Diane's arrival before she even entered the office suite. Marcus's head snapped up, irritation flashing across his face. The cleaning crew. Of course. They always came at the worst possible time. He didn't look at her, just register the interruption, the noise, the intrusion on his crisis. His eyes returned immediately to his screen. Diane had seen that look 1,000 times. The way important people looked through you instead of at you. She'd learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less disruptive to the lives that mattered more than hers. "I can come back," she offered softly. "No, it's fine. Just do what you need to do." His voice was clipped, dismissive. He waved one hand vaguely without looking up. Diane began her routine with practiced efficiency. Empty the trash. Dust the surfaces. Straighten the chairs. She moved like a ghost through his space, careful not to disturb the papers scattered across every surface. But she noticed things. She always did. The prescription bottles, 3 different kinds. The untouched food. The coffee cup rings on expensive wood furniture, suggesting hours of sleepless work. The family photograph, deliberately turned away. Most telling of all, the way his hands shook slightly as he typed. This man was drowning. She'd seen that look before, in the mirror during her own darkest times. After her husband died, after the medical bills started piling up, after she'd realized she'd be fighting alone to give her son a future. Diane dusted around his desk carefully. As she that had rolled near his laptop, her hand accidentally knocked his coffee cup. It teetered, but didn't fall. Marcus sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. "Sorry," Diane said quickly, steadying the cup. He finally looked at her. Really looked. For maybe 2 seconds. She saw what he saw. A black woman in a cleaning, interchangeable with any other person who did this work. Invisible except when inconvenient. "Just be more careful," he said, turning back to his screen. Diane felt the familiar sting. That particular kind of invisibility that came from being essential but unvalued. Her hands cleaned the spaces where important decisions were made. Her labor kept the empire running. But she was scenery, not a person. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. She moved to the windows, wiping away fingerprints from the glass. From this height, the city looked like a beautiful lie, glittering and full of possibility. Down in the neighborhoods where she lived, those lights meant unpaid electric bills, corner stores with bars on the windows. 2 people, 12 feet apart, living in completely different Americas. Marcus continued his desperate search through files, completely unaware that the woman cleaning his office possessed a quality he'd lost somewhere on his climb to the top. The ability to see another human being's suffering and actually care. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over the city. And in the shadows behind Marcus's desk, something waited to be discovered. Something that would force these 2 worlds to finally collide. Diane moved behind Marcus's massive desk to dust the credenza beneath the windows. That's when she saw it. A manila envelope had fallen in the narrow gap between the credenza and the wall. Probably knocked off the desk weeks ago and forgotten. She could see the official seal, Securities and Exchange Commission. Her heart quickened. She didn't understand high finance, but she understood government letters. They were never good news. Diane glanced. He was completely absorbed in his laptop, jaw clenched, fingers flying across the keyboard with desperate intensity. She could just leave it, pretend she hadn't seen anything. But that wasn't who she was. Her mama had raised her better than that. Raised her to do what was right even when no one was watching, even when there was no reward. Diane bent down, retrieved the envelope, and gently placed it in the center of Marcus's desk where he couldn't miss it. He didn't even notice. His eyes never left his screen. She continued cleaning, but her mind was elsewhere. That envelope looked important. Official. The kind of thing that could matter in ways she couldn't imagine. Whatever was happening in this man's life, it was serious. An hour later, Diane finished the executive floor and took her break in the small service room down the hall. She pulled out her phone, an old model with a cracked screen, and checked her messages. "Jamal, Mom, did you see? MIT confirmed my financial aid package. We just need $8,000 more for housing and books. Maybe I could get another scholarship? $8,000. It might as well have been $8 million. Diane, baby, we'll figure it out. You're going to MIT. I promise." She didn't know how she'd keep that promise. But she would, even if it meant working 4 jobs instead of 3. Another message from her mother's nurse. "Nurse Patricia, Mrs. Washington had a good day today. but the prescription refills are due next week. The pharmacy says your insurance won't cover the full cost anymore. Diane closed her eyes, the weight of it all pressed down like a physical force. She was so tired, bone tired, soul tired, but she couldn't break. Too many people depended on her. She thought about the man upstairs in his glass tower, surrounded by wealth she couldn't imagine, stressed about problems she couldn't understand. Their worlds were supposed to be separate, his problems too big and important, hers too small and common to matter. But they were both human beings, trying to protect what they loved. Diane finished her break and returned to her cart. 6 more floors to clean before the shift ended. Then the overnight shift at the hospital. Then home for 3 hours of sleep before the morning shift at the grocery store. She didn't complain. She just kept moving forward. Upstairs, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message that would send his paranoia into overdrive and put Diane directly in his crosshairs. Marcus's phone lit up at 2:47 a.m. Richard Chun, I'm sorry, Marcus. They threatened my family. I had no choice. The documents I gave them, some are real, some aren't. You need to understand what you're up against. Marcus read the message 3 times, his blood turning to ice. His CFO, his friend, had betrayed him. Not out of malice, but fear, which somehow made it worse. But what did Richard mean by some are real, some aren't? Someone had manufactured evidence and mixed it with legitimate documents to frame him. But who? And how did they access his private files? Marcus stood abruptly, pacing his office. Someone had been in here. Someone with access had leaked confidential information, probably photographed us, maybe even planted evidence. His eyes swept the office, the cleaning crew, the IT staff, the administrative assistants, the security team. Any of them could access this space. Then he remembered. The cleaning woman. She'd been here tonight, moving around his desk, touching his things. She came every night, didn't she? Alone, unsupervised, with access to everything. Marcus felt a surge of suspicion. How much did cleaning staff get paid? Probably nothing. Anyone could be bought with the right price. Corporate espionage was worth millions. No, he stopped himself. That was paranoid, wasn't it? But then again, who else had unlimited access to his private office after hours? The thought gnawed at him. By 3:30 a.m., Marcus had made a decision. He called the head of security. I want cameras installed in my office. Discreet ones. Motion activated. I want to see everyone who enters this space when I'm not here. Sir, we have building security. I want cameras in my personal office. Tomorrow. No, today. He hung up before the man could argue. If someone was stealing from him, he'd find out who. By 6 a.m., 4 hidden cameras had been installed in Marcus's office. By 7 a.m., he was home in his penthouse apartment, showering and trying to convince himself he wasn't losing his mind. By 8 a.m., he was reviewing footage from the building's existing security system, going back 2 weeks. His assistant brought coffee. His lawyer called with worse news about the investigation. His ex-wife texted about missing another of their daughter's recitals. He ignored it all. Instead, he watched grainy footage of his office at night, fast-forwarding through hours of emptiness. Then there, a figure entering with a cleaning cart. The woman from last night. Marcus slowed the footage. She moved efficiently through his space, dusting, cleaning, organizing. Nothing suspicious. But then she approached his desk. His breath caught. She bent down behind it, reaching for something. He couldn't see what. She stood up, placed something on his desk, and continued cleaning. What had she taken? Or planted? Marcus's paranoia crystallized into certainty. Tomorrow night, he'd be waiting. And he'd finally get the truth, though not the truth he expected. Marcus spent the entire next day in a haze of anxiety and anger, waiting for night to fall. His lawyer delivered more devastating news. The SEC had scheduled a formal interview in 3 days. His board of directors had called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership concerns. His company's stock had dropped 12%. Everything he'd built was collapsing. And somewhere in this catastrophe was a truth he needed to find. By 9 p.m., Marcus was back in his office, laptop open, ready to review every second of footage from the new hidden cameras. He'd been recording for 24 hours. Time to see what secrets his night shift cleaning crew was hiding. He started with last week's footage, fast-forwarding through empty hours. Then she appeared. The cleaning woman, he still didn't know her name, entered with her squeaking cart. Marcus watched her move through the familiar routine. Nothing unusual, just work. But he kept watching. She approached a plant in the corner, watering it carefully. Then she noticed something. One of his family photos had fallen over. She picked it up, looked at it for a moment, and gently set it upright. Marcus felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. She continued to the windows, cleaned them thoroughly, moved to his desk, organized his scattered papers without reading them, respecting their privacy. Then she paused, reached down behind the desk. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. She pulled out a manila envelope. The SEC envelope he'd completely forgotten about. She placed it carefully on his desk and kept working. She hadn't taken anything. She'd been helping. Marcus felt shame creep up his spine. He fast-forwarded to other nights. Watched her work with the same quiet dignity. Watched her straighten his chair, water his plants, treat his space with more care than he showed it himself. Then he reached the footage from 2 weeks ago. 11:47 p.m. The office was empty. At 11:53, the door opened. Marcus froze. Richard Chun entered, looking nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. He went straight to Marcus's filing cabinet, the one with confidential financial documents. He pulled out folders, used his phone to photograph pages, dozens of them. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. But then, at 12:04 a.m., something else appeared on the screen. The cleaning woman entered the office, cart squeaking. Richard froze, documents in hand. She stopped, clearly surprised to find someone there. For a long moment, they stared at each other. "Working late?" she asked quietly. "Just reviewing some files. Don't mind me." She nodded, not questioning why the CFO was photographing documents at midnight. Not her place to question executives. She cleaned around him. Richard quickly finished and left. She'd witnessed everything. Marcus sat back, his entire understanding of the situation shifting like continental plates. This woman, this invisible, dismissed, unnamed woman, held the key to his innocence. And he'd spent the last 48 hours suspecting her of the very crime she could prove he didn't commit. Marcus waited in his office the next night, pacing like a caged animal. When Diane arrived at midnight, he was standing by the door. She startled slightly, not expecting him to be there. "I need to talk to you," Marcus said, his voice tight with urgency. Diane's face showed caution. Nothing good ever came from late-night conversations with executives. She'd seen enough workplace drama to know that much. "Yes, sir. What's your name?" The question clearly surprised her. "Diane. Diane Washington." "Diane." He said it like he was tasting the word for the first time. "I need your help," he explained rapidly, words tumbling over each other. The investigation, the betrayal, the footage he'd reviewed, what she'd witnessed 2 weeks ago. "You saw my CFO in here that night, photographing documents. I need you to tell the investigators what you saw. You're the only witness who can prove I wasn't involved in this fraud." Diane's expression remained carefully neutral. "Mr. Thornton, I know this is unusual. I know I'm asking a lot, but I'll compensate you, of course." He pulled out his checkbook, already writing. "What do you make? Annually?" "Sir, 50,000? 100? Name your price. I'll double it, triple it, whatever it takes." Diane's jaw tightened. Something shifted in her eyes. Not anger exactly, but something harder. Disappointment, maybe. "I don't want your money, Mr. Thornton." The words hit him like cold water. "Everyone wants money. Just tell me what it'll take." "You think I can be bought?" Remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "You think because I clean offices, I don't have principles?" Marcus felt heat rise in his face. I didn't mean. I'll tell the truth because the truth matters. Not because you paid me. Your CFO was doing something wrong. I saw it. I'll say so." Marcus stared at her, completely off balance. In his world, everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something. But this woman was refusing money she clearly needed. "Why?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Because it's right." Diane met his eyes directly, without deference, without fear. "My mama taught me that your character is what you do when nobody's looking. I saw what your CFO did. I'll testify to that. But I won't be bought. Silence filled the space between them. I only ask one thing, Diane continued. If you want my help, treat me like a human being. Not a transaction. Not a tool. A person. I don't understand. I've worked in this building for 2 years, Mr. Thornton. You've never once learned my name. Never said good morning. Never acknowledged that I exist except when I'm in your way. Her voice didn't rise, didn't accuse, just stated facts. If you want my help, start by seeing me. Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. A door he'd welded shut years ago. Okay, he whispered. I'm sorry. And thank you, Diane. The federal investigator's office was cold and sterile, all white walls and fluorescent lights. Diane sat in a hard plastic chair, 2 investigators across from her, recording devices on the table between them. Marcus sat to the side with his lawyer, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Ms. Washington, thank you for coming in, the lead investigator began. We understand you work the night shift cleaning offices at Thornton Industries? Yes, sir. For 2 years. And you were working on the night of October 23rd? I work every night, sir. The investigator smiled slightly. Of course. Can you tell us what you observed that night around midnight? Diane took a breath. She wasn't used to rooms like this, to people in expensive suits hanging on her every word. It felt surreal, but she'd promised to tell the truth. I entered Mr. Thornton's office around midnight to clean. Another man was there. Is Richard Chun. He was photographing Dr. Thornton's filing cabinet. Yes, sir. He was using his phone to take pictures of papers. Lots of them. He looked nervous. When he saw me, he pretended to just be reviewing files, but I saw what he was doing. Did you report? Diane's eyes dropped. Sir. Why not? This was the part that hurt. Because I'm a cleaning lady, sir. Who would believe me over an executive? I figured it wasn't my place to question what important people do. The room fell silent. Diane felt the weight of that truth. How invisible people see everything but are never heard. The investigator cleared his throat. Ms. Washington, your testimony is incredibly valuable. You've provided details that match other evidence we've gathered. Your credibility is not in question. Over the next hour, Diane answered every question with precise detail. She remembered everything. The time, the documents, Richard's nervous behavior, the specific filing cabinet he'd accessed. Her observations were meticulous because she'd spent years being invisible, watching, noticing, remembering everything while being seen as nothing. When it was over, the investigator stood. Thank you, Ms. Washington. Your testimony will be crucial in clearing Mr. Thornton and pursuing charges against the actual perpetrators. Marcus stood too. His lawyer was smiling, already talking about press releases and reputation management. But Marcus wasn't listening to his lawyer. He was watching Diane gather her worn purse, preparing to leave this room and return to a life of night shifts and invisible labor. She just saved his entire empire, his reputation, his company, his freedom. And in his world, this would be the end of their story. The cleaning lady had served her purpose. Life would return to normal. But as Diane walked toward the door, something happened that surprised everyone in the room. Marcus's voice cracked. Wait. And in Marcus's eyes, she saw something that made her pause. The beginning of actual understanding. Marcus's reputation was restored within a week. Richard Chun and 2 board members were arrested for securities fraud. The media praised Marcus as a victim of corporate betrayal. His company's stock rebounded. Investors renewed their confidence. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, Marcus felt hollow. He stood in his penthouse apartment, 6,000 square feet of luxury overlooking the city, and felt more alone than ever. The legal victory had saved his empire, but exposed something far more devastating: the bankruptcy of his soul. For the first time in his life, Marcus couldn't outrun the truth. Diane's words echoed in his mind. I've worked in this building for 2 years. You've never once learned my name. How many other people had he never seen? How many lives had he walked past, used, benefited from, without ever acknowledging their humanity? Marcus began to notice things he'd ignored for years. The security guard who held doors, Frank, his name was Frank. The barista who made his coffee every morning, Maria. The people who made his life function while remaining invisible to him. He started researching. What did cleaning staff earn? The number shocked him. Diane worked 3 jobs. 3. And still struggled to pay her mother's medical bills. Still scraped together money for her son's education. Meanwhile, Marcus had 3 homes he rarely used. One night, unable to sleep, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He drove to Diane's neighborhood. The contrast was staggering. No gleaming towers here. Just tired apartment buildings, broken streetlights, corner stores with security bars. This was 40 minutes from his penthouse, but it might as well have been another planet. Children played in parking lots because there were no parks. Elderly people sat on stoops because there was nowhere else to go. Working people came home exhausted from jobs that didn't pay enough to lift them out of this place. This was where Diane lived, where she raised her son, where she returned after cleaning offices in towers of glass and steel. Marcus sat in his Tesla, windows up, and felt his entire worldview crack apart. He believed in meritocracy, that success came to those who worked hard enough, were smart enough, wanted it enough. He believed his wealth was earned purely through his own brilliance and determination. But Diane worked harder than he ever had. Worked 3 jobs while he struggled with one, and still couldn't afford basic security. The system he'd benefited from wasn't broken. It was designed exactly this way. Designed to keep people like Diane running in place, while people like him accumulated wealth built on their invisible labor. Marcus's life wasn't ruined by the scandal. It was ruined by finally seeing the truth. He couldn't unsee it now. Couldn't return to comfortable ignorance. The glass tower of his privilege had shattered, and there was no putting it back together. The question was, what would he do with this knowledge? Would he look away again? Or would he actually change? Marcus asked to meet Diane at a coffee shop halfway between their worlds. She arrived in her work uniform, between shifts as always. Cautious, guarded. "Thank you for coming," Marcus began. "I've been thinking about what you said. About being seen." Diane waited, saying nothing. "I want to start a foundation," he continued. "Scholarships for children of working parents. Support for families dealing with medical debt. But I don't want to just throw money at problems I don't understand." He paused. "I want you to help me build it. Not as a thank you. As a partner. You understand these issues in ways I never will." Diane's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Thornton." "Marcus. Please. Marcus. I appreciate the offer, but I don't have time for charity work. I have 3 jobs. Then quit them. Come work for the foundation full-time. I'll pay you what you're actually worth. Not as a cleaning person, but as someone with invaluable perspective and wisdom. You don't know anything about my qualifications. I know you raised a son who got into MIT while working 3 jobs and caring for your sick mother. I know you witnessed a crime and told the truth even when you had nothing to gain. I know you see things that educated people miss because we're too busy looking at spreadsheets instead of human beings." Marcus leaned forward. "Those are exactly the qualifications this work needs." Diane studied him carefully. "Why? Why does this suddenly matter to you?" Marcus didn't have a simple answer. How could he explain that she'd held up a mirror and he'd finally seen himself clearly? That he couldn't live with what he saw? "Because my life was built on not seeing people like you," he said quietly. "And I can't do that anymore. I can't unsee what you showed me. I either change or I become something I don't want to be." Diane was quiet for a long moment. "I've heard promises from powerful people before, Marcus. They don't usually last. I know, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I mean it." "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I have conditions. This isn't about saving me. It's about changing systems. Real change, not publicity." "Agreed. And you implement changes in your own company first. Living wages for all contracted workers. Healthcare. Respect. Done. And you learn everyone's names. Every person who makes your company run." Marcus smiled slightly. "That one might take a while. But yes." Diane stood to leave, then paused. "My son, Jamal, he's brilliant. He's going to MIT. But we're 8,000 short for housing and books." "Consider it handled," Marcus said immediately. "No." Diane's voice was firm. "A scholarship. One he earns. Not charity. Not because of me. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the distinction. A scholarship. He'll earn it on merit. For the first time, Diane smiled, and Marcus realized that earning her trust would be harder and more valuable than earning his first billion. 6 months later, dawn broke over the city as Marcus and Diane sat in his office, the same office where they'd first met as strangers from different worlds. But everything had changed. Diane was now director of community impact at the Thornton Foundation. The foundation had provided 42 full scholarships to children of working families, healthcare assistance to hundreds more, job training programs, childcare support. But more importantly, Thornton Industries had transformed. Every contracted worker now earned a living wage with full benefits. The company had implemented a program where executives spent 1 week annually doing frontline work, security, cleaning, food service, to understand the business from every level. Marcus had personally learned the names of all 347 people who worked in his headquarters building, not as a publicity stunt, but because they deserved to be seen. Jamal starts MIT next week, Diane said, looking at photos on her phone. Pride radiated from her smile. You must be incredibly proud. I am, but I'm also grateful. Not just for the scholarship, for all of it, for being seen. Marcus looked out at the sunrise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I've been thinking about the title of our story. The clickbait version would be, a black single mother cleaned a billionaire's office at night. By morning, his life was ruined. Diane raised an eyebrow. And was it ruined? The old life, yes. Completely destroyed. I can't go back to not seeing people. Can't pretend success exists in isolation. Can't measure worth purely in dollars. He turned to her. But this life, the one where I actually know my daughter's teacher's name, where I understand that dignity matters more than profit margins, where I have real relationships instead of transactional ones. This life is better, fuller, more human. So the clickbait title is misleading, Diane smiled. The best ones always are. They sat in comfortable silence as the city woke up below them. People heading to jobs, some in towers of glass, some in schools and hospitals and stores. All of them essential. All of them deserving of dignity. You know what I learned? Diane said softly, we're all invisible until someone chooses to see us. And we're all powerful when we choose to see others. Marcus nodded. I thought power was about money and influence. Turns out it's about recognition, connection, treating people like they matter. Because they do matter. Yes, they do. The sun cleared the horizon, flooding the office with light. 2 people who started as strangers, separated by every measure of worldly success, had become partners in something more valuable than any business empire. They'd become a reminder that humanity isn't measured in bank accounts or corner offices, but in the simple, revolutionary act of truly seeing each other. Moral lesson. True wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's who you acknowledge. The most powerful thing you possess isn't money or status. It's the ability to see another person's humanity and honor it. We live in a world that teaches us to measure success by what we own, but real success is measured by how we treat people who can do nothing for us in return. Every day, you pass by people whose labor makes your life possible. The person who cleans your office, serves your coffee, delivers your packages, stocks your groceries. They are not invisible. They are human beings with dreams, struggles, families, and dignity that deserves recognition. Diane didn't need Marcus to save her. She needed him to see her. And when he finally did, they both were transformed. The beautiful truth is this. When you choose to truly see another person, to learn their name, acknowledge their worth, recognize their humanity, you don't diminish yourself. You become more fully human. You become part of a connected world instead of an isolated tower. Marcus's life was ruined because he could no longer live in comfortable blindness. But that ruin became his redemption. Your challenge today is simple but revolutionary. Notice someone you usually overlook. The cashier at your grocery store. The janitor in your building. The person serving your food. Learn their name. Make eye contact. See them as the whole, complex, valuable human being they are. Because the person you dismiss today might be the one who saves you tomorrow. Not with money or power, but with the quiet strength that comes from knowing your worth even when the world refuses to see it. Real change doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with recognition, with dignity, with seeing each other as equals in our shared humanity. The question isn't whether you have power. The question is, what will you do with the power you already have? The power to see, to acknowledge, to honor another human being? Don't let this story end here. Share it with someone who needs to remember that every person matters. Subscribe for more stories that challenge us to be better, to see clearer, to love deeper. And leave a comment telling us, who will you see differently after hearing this story? Because the world changes one act of recognition at a time. And it starts with you. Hit that subscribe button, notifications, and let's build a community that refuses to let anyone remain invisible. Remember, you are not too small to make a difference. You're not too ordinary to change a life. You just have to choose to see. The clock struck midnight in the Thornton Industries Tower. 73 floors below, the city pulsed with life. But up here, in the glass-walled penthouse office, Marcus Thornton sat alone, a billionaire surrounded by everything money could buy, yet more isolated than he'd ever been. His hands trembled as he read the email one more time. Corporate fraud investigation. Your name implicated. Prepare for federal charges. 20 years of building an empire, gone in a single accusation. He didn't hear the elevator ding. Didn't notice the quiet woman who stepped onto his floor, pushing a cleaning cart with a broken wheel that squeaked softly against the marble. Her name was Diane Washington, though he'd never bothered to learn it. In 8 hours, everything he knew about power, worth, and truth would be destroyed. But not in the way he feared. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Marcus Thornton stared at the email that Mr. Thornton investigators have received evidence of securities fraud involving Thornton Industries. Your CFO has provision suggesting your direct involvement. Expect formal charges within 48 hours. He read it again. The words refused to change. Impossible. He'd built this company from nothing, a college dropout with a borrowed laptop and a revolutionary idea. 15 years of 18-hour days, calculated risks, and ruthless determination had created a tech empire worth $3 billion. He'd done everything but mostly. His back from the floor was a man who looked successful but felt hollow. The city glittered 73 floors below, indifferent to his crisis. When had he last felt truly connected to another human being? When had success become his only measure of worth? The prescription bottles on his desk caught his eye. Anxiety medication. Sleep aids. The untouched dinner his assistant had ordered 6 hours ago, now cold. The framed photo of his ex-wife and daughter, face force, was supposed to represent a cheat. Instead, it felt like a glass. Marcus loosened his tie and up, frantically searching for anything that could prove his innocence. His CFO, Richard